What is up, guys? It's Troy at the Full Setup, back with another video for you, and the day has finally come. Zen 3 is out. Well, it was out yesterday, but I've got my CPU today. So I have the Ryzen 5 3600 CPU, 6 cores, 12 threads, and we are going to be building this lovely machine here. This is also going to feature an RTX 2060 graphics card. Quite a long video, as you know with me with the build videos, I always do like to waffle on, but we're going to sort of show you everything. I'm going to show you how to wire up all of this lovely Deepcool RGB stuff as well. And then I'm going to be back at the end of the video as well to talk about the benchmark that will be coming out later during the week. And I also just want your opinions on a few things on how I'm going to run those benchmark tests as well. Before we start with the review, I want to say a huge thanks to today's sponsor, First Player. First Player are a PC gaming accessories company that make, well, a little bit of everything. From chairs to desks to slick RGB cases, power supplies, mice and headsets, and some fantastic gaming keyboards. And as a huge thank you to everyone watching this video, First Player has given me one of their MK6 Bullet Hunters for a giveaway. The MK6 Bullet Hunter features super clicky blue removable switches, has tons of RGB including full software customization and macro support, and for your chance to win the competition, all you have to do is subscribe to my channel and pop over to my Discord server. But you can find more details on how to enter and when the competition ends in the description below. And please do take the time to have a look at some of First Player's fantastic gaming gadgets. Come on. Ah! I feel like we might have to use the gaming fly swatter for this video because I have got the back door open. So we might have to use this at some point. So here's a few of the bits and bobs that we're going to be using today. Sort of I'd say it's a Deepcool sponsored build because we're using loads of the stuff they sent over. So they just sent over the Matrexx 70 case. And I did actually unbox it. It's been with me for like a month. And they stuck inside. These are the MF120S fans. So these are those ones that have got like the lights in the middle. Now, I don't think I'm going to use these in this build today because they're actually sending over another case. So I'm going to do another build next month. And I think these will be more suited for it. So I might not use these today. I think I'm going to go for all matching fans all round. And this is one thing we'll definitely be using. So this is their RGB GPU holder. Focus. Focus. There you go. That's going to look pretty bling in there. I don't know if it's going to get in the way or not, but I just like it. I feel like it's just going to add a bit of light in areas you wouldn't normally get light. So, one thing you're going to notice is we don't have a Ryzen 3 series CPU. I think it's most likely going to be a 6 core, so we're talking 3600 or 3600X. But I'm shooting all of this video before the CPU's turned up, getting all the build together. I've been prepping the motherboard. So I'm going to put the Ryzen CPU in right at the end when it gets delivered with me next week. So yeah, I'm going to try not to name it too much because we don't know which one we're getting and I'm into edit it out all the time. But it's going to be a 6 core. So I'm going to put the case back together and we can have a quick look around the case because I am loving this Matrexx 70 case. So the Matrexx 70 case, this is the 3 fan version. So this comes with 3 addressable RGB fans in the front. And one thing I'm liking about it is it feels like sort of a very modular case. So there's an open button at the front here, which just simply pops out the glass front, which we can put back in because we're not going to put a radiator in here. But as you can see, this bracket is removable. So you can fit a 360 radiator in there, nicey. Now there's dust filters all the way around it. There's one dust filter that fits behind here. We have another dust filter as well at the top. Fit up to a 360mm radiator up top and a 360mm radiator in the front. Now I'm only going to use a 240 radiator today, but Deepcool are sending over their Castle V2 360mm. It's just a very clean look all the way around. It is thin because remember, although this case with the fans is a little bit more, it is a budget oriented case. So the steel does feel a little thin, but the paintwork is very nice on it indeed. Up top we have the power button, reset switch, and then there is also two USB 3s, USB 2.0 audio in and out. Sadly no USB-C, but that would be really nice to see here. Now one thing I love on this is that there is simply 2 thumb screws at the top and there is like a groove down in here, so you just simply lift the glass out and it is exactly the same around the back. So simply just take off the top 2 thumb screws and they pop in. Over to the internals of the case then, and straight off the bat I am going to make a huge criticism. We have all this spacing here, we have all these holes, and these holes are for fitting 2.5mm drives. You can obviously bring your cables through. You've got cables here as well, depending on how big a motherboard you're going to fit in this case. But there's no rubber grommets, and for me, that is a big con. In 2019, cases without rubber grommets in, for the price that this sells at, I'm going to have to say that really should be resolved. There are nice runs to clip your cables across, but obviously you're going to want to be a bit careful with your cable management, which annoys me because if I'm building a PC for a friend, I do very good cable management, but because I take my PCs apart so much, I generally just like to throw my cables in the back and be done with it. So let's have a closer look at the basement compartment then. Now there is this piece of tempered glass, which has already got a bit dusty and fingerprinty. And then you can also see there's this hard drive cage here and two holes. The way it comes configured is that this hard drive cage lines up with the end of the glass. I've actually moved it over here. So you're going to have this one screw here. Hopefully I can put my graphics card holder in here. Now one thing I don't like about it really is the way that these holes are done to screw this into place. I think it's a little bit sloppy and I think that is a better way that we could do it. There is also a recess here as well to get all your cables through up to your motherboard. Now this is fully removable. You don't have to have this in here. You can also take the hard drive cage out. I might have already mentioned that. And this front panel comes out, but I'm not going to take it out today. There is two screws here and two screws here. Now when you take this all out, I think there's room for one 120mm or maybe even a 140 fan. Now on the standard Matrexx, you would have to take this out to put an RGB strip in it. But on the free fan one, I can see there is already an RGB strip installed. Now here on the Pcie, there is a piece you can take out for doing vertical GPU mounting. I think you have to buy the entire kit separately. Now there's one 120mm fan in the top, but we're going to take that out. Honestly, I understand why they've put one so you can have some airflow coming out, but I just think it's a wasted expense. You're going to want to replace that with an RGB one because you bought an RGB case. Over to the back, and there are two 2.5-inch slots that we are going to be using today. There is room for two 3.5-inch hard drives. You can put another two 2.5-inch drives in the front as well. I don't know, I might put them in the front actually. We'll have a little think about that. Yeah, let's maybe put them in the front. And then you've also got a nice big space for your power supply in there as well. So you're going to be able to fit nice big power supplies in here. And I think that's what we should start with installing. As for included accessories, there's a nice amount of screws here. We've got standoffs and everything. I'm just going to pour those in a tray over here. Got a good amount of cable ties. Then there is a 5-fan PWM splitter, but I'll be careful of not putting too powerful fans on a 1-to-5 splitter. And there's a couple of RGB cables, and we're going to go over all the RGB in a minute as well. Now, as for the power supply, I'm going to be using my Gigabyte B700H. These power supplies I've been using for about 2 years. They've done me really well. You could pick them up for about £50. Now, you're not going to need 700 watts for this build. A 450 to 500 watt power supply will be fine. Probably 500 watt if you're going to be overclocking everything, because it will just give you a little bit of headroom. Now, I've got a semi-modular supply here as well. Part of the reason as well I wanted to use that is to use as minimal amount of cables as possible. So all I have plugged into this is the... Oh, gone the wrong way. All I have plugged into this is one SATA cable for my 2 hard drives, SATA power, and one PCIe cable for graphics cards as well. But I can add another graphics card cable if I need to for something a little bit more power hungry. If you can pick one of these up cheap, I would highly recommend them. They do come with a 5-year warranty as well, 80+ bronze power supply. But again, I generally don't spend a lot of money on power supplies. If you're new to building and you think you need to spend over £100 on a power supply, that's the #1 mistake you're making with your first build. Moving over to why I chose the cheapest motherboard over my most expensive motherboard for this build. Now, the Crosshair Hero 5 would be perfect for a Ryzen 3000 series because I've never had any trouble at running 3600 MHz memory on it. And we know that from what AMD have told us, 3600 MHz will be the sweet spot. But there are 2 reasons why this isn't going into this build. Number 1, this is currently in my editing rig. Now, as much as I think the Ryzen 3000 launch is going to go proper smooth, there is a chance you're going to run into issues. If Adobe Premiere can't work, I can't edit down this video. So this is staying in that system. So that Ryzen system will be my editing system for the next month. I will switch over to Ryzen 3000 for full editing once I am happy that everything is stable, but I think it's going to be fine. Now, one thing as well is I didn't want a new motherboard at launch. So I didn't want an X570 motherboard just in case there was any day one problems, because that adds more problems to the mix. The other thing as well, you might have seen last year that Jay's 2 cents was a little bit late with releasing his Ryzen 2 videos. And that was because he was using crosshair motherboards. I had the same issue. Basically, the BIOSes were really messed up until day one. So that's why you couldn't get his content made earlier as well. So that's why I'm not using this motherboard. Now, I do have another Asus X370 motherboard, but I don't have a backplate for it, an IO shield, because I picked it up secondhand dirt cheap. So I really wanted to use a lower end motherboard, like a cheaper motherboard, because as much as we got some expensive parts here, this is stuff that's been sent to me. You don't need to go out and buy loads of this fancy stuff straight away. Do you know what I mean? You build the main specs of your system. A couple of months later, you treat yourself to cases, RGB, really fancy stuff. So I wanted to use a cheaper motherboard, which is why we're using the Aorus B450 Elite. Now, as for memory so far, I've been able to push 3466 out of it. I've got a feeling that I can get 3600 stable. So hopefully we can test with that. I got this open box for £45. What an absolute bargain, and I've been thoroughly impressed with this motherboard. Also, it has headers as well for the RGB, but again, that shouldn't be a reason to buy a motherboard, you know. I should be putting this board in the system, but I wanted a last gen motherboard, and I wanted something that was a common motherboard that most people are going to buy. So we're going to put this one in. A couple of must-dos before you always put in the motherboard. Pull the 8-pin power connector through, because it can be an absolute pig to get in afterwards. This does have some height for a radiator, so it wouldn't be that bad. And you also want to check where your standoff pins are, because a couple of these here, oh, just idiot, I've scratched the case. We're gonna have to touch that up with a Sharpie. Don't do what I did and do pliers sideways. But a couple of these were in the way, so you need to move them out the way, because if they scratch the underneath of your motherboard, they could short it out. One thing you should normally do, which I haven't done, is just put a slightly fatter screw on and then they come off, but my screwdriver is not quite up to it. Now, there is no IO shield because the IO shield is built onto the motherboard. Can't believe I scratched the case, gutted. And you may well also notice that I have swapped the fan out as well. So we've got a Deepcool CF120 fan. Last little check that all of these are in the right place. Yes, they are. And then we just pop that board into position. Start screwing all the screws in, and make sure you do every single screw. So, motherboard is in. We need to install some memory, and this was another difficult one for me as well, because I do have RGB memory. It's just my RGB memory, my ballistics memory, I can only push to about 3200 megahertz with not very good timings. So I'm going to use the memory I've used for the last 2 generations. This is the Team Dark 8-pack edition memory. This is Samsung B-Dice 3600. I've run this at loads of different speeds with incredibly tight timings as well. And you want to put it in the 2nd slot and the 4th slot. One thing I haven't mentioned as well is, yes, I have updated the BIOS on this motherboard beforehand. So if you bought this motherboard today, it would not have the right BIOS. So you just push them down, nice little click, we got the memory in. Now, if you did want some RGB memory and you wanted Samsung B-Dice, I would push you towards getting the Corsair Vengeance Pro RGB. Now, the timings aren't as tight as these, but you should be able to adjust them to pretty much the same timings as this memory kit. Now, something we definitely know we're getting with Ryzen 3000 is PCIe Express 4.0, which is going to mean blisteringly fast hard drives. Now, obviously, this motherboard, I doubt it's going to support it. I know it's a bit of a grey area at the moment, but I doubt they will, so I didn't pick one up. But I didn't want a SATA SSD. I wanted an NVMe SSD, but I wanted one that was cheap. So I took a punt on this. This is the, what was it again? Silicon Power A80. This is a 256GB NVMe SSD, which I paid £36 for, which is just mad how much the price has come down. Now, I was originally looking at the Corsair MP300. That was about £40. And the thing is, with the cheapest NVMe drives, they're still a lot faster than SATA drives. but they're not as fast as something like the Samsung Evos I have in my editing rig. So the MP300 was saying about 1500 megabyte reads and 1000 megabyte writes. This little thing is closer to 3000 megabytes in read. So we're going to pop the SSD in the slot that will be under the graphics card, but there is a, what are they called, heatsink that pops over the top. Here is the heatsink. It's quite hard to see because it's all black. Just put that in there. And that sort of sticks to the drive. So obviously you're going to want to install your CPU first, but the CPU isn't here. So one thing I know with Deepcool coolers, and especially with the AM4 bracket, is they are a bit of a pig on the cabling and the positioning. I've always liked that they have short cables. So this is the Deepcool Captain Pro that we're using here. Make sure all those cables are going in. But one thing I actually wanted to do was to put this into position to see where's best for it to go. See, that is almost how you need the bracket to be. The Intel bracket is like this. You can put it both ways, but you can't with the Deepcool one, which is a royal pain in the butt because you sort of want it to be like there. So would it best be like this, meaning we're going to have to swap the fans around. Let's have a little look and see. That looks absolutely terrible. What are we going to do with the Deepcool cooler? Can't do that. That looks freaking ridiculous. Oh, let's have a secondary think about this. So the decision has been made that there is no choice but to front mount the radiator. I've decided not to go for a push-pull configuration. So I'm going to have my other two fans that come included with this cooler up in the top here. Another 120 is well here at the rear, so that's going to move loads of air over my VRM area. There'll be one fan free that will be pushing air in towards my graphics card, and these are vented as well, quite well vented, so the graphics card will be able to pull nice amount of air in as well. So yeah, a little bit of a setback, very gutted. You know, obviously it's a Deepcool case with Deepcool cooler, and that was one thing I noticed when I reviewed this cooler, that on AM4, this bracket really doesn't give you a lot of options on where to put the coolers inside the case. So I definitely think it needs to be addressed. It's something to do with the way the tubing comes out on the Captain coolers, the Captain Pro coolers as well. And I would love to see that addressed on a future build. So look what turned up at work today. So we've got the Ryzen 5 3600. I'm loving the look of this box. Got this all nice silver finish on it. 3rd generation processor, Pcie Gen 4, AMD Ryzen 5. There's the CPU on the side there. A few little things on the bottom. VR ready. Well, yeah. NVMe Express. Cool. Super speed USB. Fantastic. Up at the top there, we have it's a 6-core, 12-thread processor. 4.2 gigahertz max boost. And from most of the reviews I've been looking at, the all-core turbos around 4 to 4.1 gigahertz. Now, everyone for the last year, the rumor mill has been like 5 gigahertz, because they're just trying to sell you bullshit. All of the rumor mills have been like, it's going to overclock loads, it's going to overclock loads. I have been keeping an open mind and said to everyone, I imagine it will just be like the last 2 gens of Ryzen, and the overclocking potential won't be that good. And as we know, this chip is only going to overclock to about 4.3 gigahertz. But hey, you know, you love the rumor videos. Comes with the Wraith Spire. I think is it the light cooler as well? Pre-applied thermal paste. Not going to use that. One thing I know with these stock coolers though, if you do use the stock cooler, when you remove it from your CPU, be very careful, because I've often found that these stick to the CPU, so lift it straight up, do not twist it, because you could bend pins. That's why I don't like using these coolers. The AMD Wraith coolers are great, but I find they're a little bit too tight. I know that sounds weird, but there it is. Got the Ryzen sticker in there. Let's get this thing installed. So we're going to lift the retention arm up. We're going to slowly place in our CPU. Give it a little, I like to just give it a little wiggle like that with my thumb. Clamp that into place. Then we're going to use Arctic MX4 thermal paste. Arctic send me loads of this on the regular. I've been using it for years and I use it for pretty much every benchmark you see on the channel. Now I like to just put a little bit more on for AMD, just a tiny little touch more for AMD CPUs, because obviously that IHS is a little bit larger than Intel. Then I just need to, this is going to be a bit awkward because I've sort of got the whole system built now, so I haven't got as much play with moving my cooler around. And I'm doing this on quite a high up desk, well, table. And one thing I always do is, you know, whether it's 2 screws or 4 screws on a CPU cooler, just start them off a little bit, oh, Jesus, a little bit at a time. Scratch the case, scratch the RAM. Can't even see this screw. But yeah, I just tighten them a little bit at a time on each side. And one thing as well, do not over tighten. Feel that there? Once it bites, it's tight. That's my golden rule. And if you're doing this outside of the case, don't over tighten it again, because what you can do is bend your motherboard a little bit. So I generally put them on loose outside of the case and then give it the final tighten up once I put it in the case. So as for the graphics card, I'm going to start with an RTX 2060 Dual. And I know what a lot of you are thinking. Buy a 2060 Super. Buy an AMD Navi. And I did plan to, but again, I don't get sent this stuff early, so I'm focusing on reviewing the CPU. Adding a GPU into the mix is going to be quite difficult for me. And also as well, there'll be something else that I will be covering at the end of my benchmark reviews of this PC. Sadly, I was really screwed over last week, and that has resulted in me losing quite a lot of money. So that's why you're not seeing RGB RAM, and that's why you will probably have to wait till early August for my RTX 2060 Super reviews and maybe some AMD Navi cards as well. Now I really wish there was a hole in the front here to run my 8-pin. I'm using a braided extension here. Should we install this graphics card sagger? Because this Asus dual card does sag a little bit, so I'm going to have a little play with that for a few minutes and we'll get it installed. Right, so there's this little black thing. This cable is so this is the older gigabyte version. This is addressable RGB, so this has multicolors at a time. You can't plug this into a 5-volt RGB header, so that's for the older one. But I think Gigabyte have got rid of it now, and they've gone to use the Asus one, which is like, you can see it there, like 2 pins, miss a pin, 1 pin. So we're going to use that to hook up to our motherboard. And then here it is. So there's like a sticker on the bottom here. It looks to be what is an extension bar. I don't know what that's for. That must be for a very deep case. I think I want to sit this as far as forward as it can go on the glass. Because the problem is, if I use a smaller graphics card, for most system builders this would be fine because you don't take anything out that often. But I need to pop this out to put another graphics card in. Rendering this little thing a little bit annoying. Like, you'd probably want it there. But that looks stupid there. You want it there, but then it covers up the Asus logo. I'm not too keen on the Deepcool logo on the top. I'm going to go with putting it about here. Because then for the even smaller graphics cards, that's going to get in the way of my power slots. Where shall I put this? Why can't we do this interactive? I should be doing this live. Screw it, I'm going to put it there. And we'll take it out if we need to take it out. Do you know what I'm going to do first? Let's plug these wires in. So I need this one. Oh, and that is like an extension cable as well. So you can, I don't know if you can see this, so you can split another one off of it. So that cable is actually over there, that header. So if we just put it in. One thing I actually did as well was I cleaned the underside of this glass before I put it in, because obviously where you're taking it all off there's going to be fingerprints. You don't want to build loads of stuff. You can literally just see the side of my face. I think this is why I haven't done a loaded RGB video before. Takes a long time. So I'm going to put that as close to the glass as possible. So I don't even know how I'm going to get my graphics card out from there. I suppose, you can take these screws out actually down here. So yeah, I can remove that bit. Good freaking shout. So screws either side here. That's just a thumb screw basically. God. I bet everyone stopped. Well, I bet you all stopped watching now. You know, let's get through the video. This guy's a freaking idiot. I've given the cable sort of a bit of a tidy. It is looking quite nice back here. Maybe there'll be some B-roll or something. But we need to talk about the RGB stuff. And this is where I'm going to really lose you all. Now, I said earlier there was a reset switch at the top. That is actually an LED light. Now, there's one cable here which says main. So that's the one that feeds up to this LED light. There's also an eSATA power if you're using that. So that has to hook up to your power supply. You do not use this cable if you're hooking up to a motherboard. Now, the way that Deepcool stuff works, I don't know if you can see all this, it's like it daisy chains, but they always leave one end free, so you can plug in more. Now, the earlier Deepcool stuff does come with more cables like this, so they sort of plug in together a daisy chain, but the newer ones, they come with a fan hub, not a fan hub, an RGB hub controller. And again, we can plug in 5 devices, and then we have an output here. So that's sort of how you daisy chain it all. Now, all you'd have to do for this is unplug the main cable. You then plug in the provided motherboard cable, which has one of each end. So whether it's the standard which Gigabyte are using now, and also Asus and MSI, or the old Gigabyte one, you plug it into the main one and you plug that into your board. You then have one free port and you plug in the hub. Now, I've plugged in like 8-9 devices on motherboards where I'm limited to one header, but on this board I've got 2. So what I'm actually going to do is use the included motherboard cable, and that's going to go to my socket that's up here. I'll plug that in a second. So that's going to go into my top RGB one. And then for the hub, we're going to hook the hub up to the motherboard connector, and then we're going to use that extra pin that I said was on the GPU holder. So we could technically do 2 different zones of lighting. We can have all of the back as one zone and everything in the front as the other, but I'll probably sync it all as the same. So then there we go. All I need to do now is plug in all of my other RGB cables. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 here, and plug them into 1, 2, 3, 4 on here. A lot of people ask me a lot of questions about this all the time. Just trust me, Deepcool provide enough stuff in all of their gear for you to wire everything that comes with your kit, and there is always one extra port to get another kit and wire in more devices. Now, as you can see, yeah, it does look a bit messy. I haven't gone perfect with it, but I've sort of got everything in areas so I know where it all is. Very minimum cables under here for the glass. Reason I left the hard drive cable in is because that's where I've got a load of my RGB cables stuff. Nothing is going to be seen in any of these gaps that I didn't like the look of. So yeah, I can still sort of get to everything quite quickly. I have used a couple of cable ties, but for me it's like, I know a lot of people get real bad about the back, and I know One Shot's definitely going to be whinging about this because he's like got mad computer OCD. But like, there we go, there's the click. I don't even care if I got to push it real tight, baby. If the back goes on, I couldn't quite frankly give a damn. Because when the front looks like this, that's all that matters. So here is the build then, and wow. For someone like myself that didn't even like RGB a couple of years ago, this thing is a piece of art. I mean, the only thing missing is RGB RAM really, and maybe, you know, 2080 Ti, but I can't afford that. Building in the case, absolutely fantastic. Really enjoyed building in it. If there was one thing I didn't like, and that is that bit of the footage was actually cut out from the video because it was where I was trying to get the cooler in, is up at the top. So there's sort of like a little recess bit where you've got the top of like the motherboard mount, and normally you would have like holes coming up. It's a really crap explanation, but it doesn't have any. It's only got the 2 holes either side just above the motherboard, and I find that just makes it a little bit messier for cabling than it has to be. Normally on most other cases you've got about 3 or 4 other holes so you can put cables up in different positions. What am I doing with this? You don't know what I'm doing. GPU mount, love the look of that GPU mount. It was a little bit frustrating at first figuring it out, Obviously for you that's not going to replace a graphics card that often, it's fine. I was just whinging about it because obviously I pop hardware in my PC all the time, and I need to be able to take it apart easily. A little bit gutted that I couldn't get the cooler up in the top. Now, I have figured out a couple of ways I can get it in the top, but I just don't like the way that the cables look. I sort of made this sound like it was all Deepcool coolers. This is just the Captain range of coolers that sort of suffer from this hard to get cables in the tubing in different areas look. So the rest of their coolers, like the Castle, the L240s, the old Maelstroms, they're all perfectly fine for top mounting. The CF120 fans look beautiful. Love this little RGB strip going across. Case was just nice to build in. Honestly, if it just had those grommets, it'd be lovely. And I'm just loving the 1TB little Western Digital black drive up there as my Fusion drive. Looks really good. So obviously I haven't been able to game on it yet, and I'm really looking forward to doing the benchmarks over the next few days. And I'm probably not going to do the actual proper testing till Wednesday. So I've got tomorrow off work, and I just want to mess around with it, you know, tweak it, compare it to other scores online. And memory is one that I'm quite confused on. So this budget B450 motherboard is only rated at 3000 megahertz. Turned it on, XMP'd 3600 megahertz. It's working perfectly fine with the Ryzen 3600 CPU. So that was one thing I was worried about. But from looking at other scores, 3600 megahertz at CL16 does look about the same in spec wise, like FPS, to 3200 megahertz CL14, which is what I normally test at. Most of you people have got 3200 megahertz RAM anyway, so I think, yeah, 3200 megahertz, I think that's where I should test at it with. Not going to be stacks of ray tracing in it because I'm not really sold by ray tracing yet. I think it looks beautiful, but I don't think the 2060 is equipped enough. So as for the ray tracing on that, that'll probably be at the end of the video. But yeah, going to be loads of benchmarks. I might even throw in Fortnite too, because I know you've all been complaining that Fortnite isn't in the video. And that's about it, really. I'm really happy with it. If you've got any questions that you want to ask me, let me know. Make sure you go and check out First Player's website. There's affiliate links in the description as well to most of the stuff that's in this case. So if it's something you want to buy, please use the affiliate link because it really does help me out. And yeah, the benchmark first one should be up maybe Thursday or Friday this week. I know it's been a long video. Thank you for staying along with me. Just waffling on now because I'm knackered. Couldn't wait to get home from work and stick that CPU in. Ah, come on. Rip Intel. Rip Intel.